Evening, everyone. We're going to get started. My name is Ellen Baca. I'm the Lehigh Valley Coordinator for the Epilepsy Foundation. Tonight, our speaker is Angela Murphy, who's going to talk to us about special education as we start this new school year, and to go over some rights that you have as parents in regards to your children and their IEP. When I looked at the attendees for this evening, there were a lot of names that I was not familiar with, so that's wonderful. But I just wanted to let you guys know what we do with the foundation before Angela gets started. So we are the Epilepsy Foundation of Eastern Pennsylvania, and we cover the 18 counties of Eastern Pennsylvania. You can see the map there. So we're a nonprofit charitable organization, and we help people and families with epilepsy. These are some of our services. We do a lot of information and referrals. If you called me up and wanted to get a doctor, a neurologist, I'd be the person you could call. We have support groups and educational conferences. Our conferences have been this year on Zoom, which has actually been very convenient for a lot of people. We do Project School Alert, which I'll explain, and we do advocacy, and we do trainings for first responders, teachers, and we also have adult services and young adult services. So you can check out our website to find out to learn more about these services. We have a support group all over. We have various ones in Bucks and Berks, Delaware. We have one right here in the Lehigh Valley. So you can also go to our website and find out those, and they're currently being broadcast virtually. So what's great about that is, although we miss seeing each other in person, someone from, say, Philadelphia could actually tune into the Lehigh Valley support group if they were interested in a speaker or just wanted some extra support. So that's always been very convenient, not only for our support groups, but any of our educational conferences, educational webinars. So the Lehigh Valley support group, right now we're meeting via Zoom, and it's every second Thursday of the month, starting at 6 o'clock. And these are some of the upcoming support groups that we're having. We have free Project School Alert programs. That is, we train school personnel about what a seizure looks like, the various types of seizures, and first aid for seizures. We go out and do that for teachers, aides, nurses, whoever is dealing with a child with epilepsy. We're here to train them to recognize those types of seizures and to respond appropriately. And we also have age-appropriate programs for students with epilepsy, ranging from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade, even preschool. And it's great because the kids get to find out what epilepsy is, and when they see a child having a seizure, they feel empowered with the knowledge of understanding what it is. So and they know we teach them how to react properly to a seizure, first aid. So we have that. These are all our services are free. And the other thing we'd like to point out is school advocacy. We will accompany you to any meeting, school meeting, and help with the process of developing the IEP, the seizure action plan, the 504 plan. So we're there to support you. So all you got to do is give us a call, and we'll come out with and attend your meeting with you. So our resources, you want to learn more about our resources, our website is efepa.org. You can also sign up for our newsletter, get on our mailing list so you can find out about upcoming programs and services. And I am the local Lehigh Valley coordinator. If you're not from the Lehigh Valley, feel free to call me. I'll direct you to the right person, or you can go to our website, efepa.org. Just some maintenance here. The webinar is being recorded for future use. Your faces are not seen on this webinar, or your voices. So, but we will be reading questions aloud. So you might want to be careful of that, because this will be published maybe on YouTube or something in the future. You can submit your questions via the chat bar at the bottom. Some questions will be answered during the presentation, but we want to make sure we get through the entire presentation. So we might only read a few questions after each section, but the bulk of the questions will be answered at the very end. So we want to make you aware of that. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Angela Murphy. She's an attorney with the law offices of Murphy and Murphy. She specializes, her organization specializes in special education and family law for more than 30 years. She works with families throughout the state of Pennsylvania, and she's a frequent presenter on special education topics and has 3 adult children with epilepsy. Sorry, not with epilepsy, with disabilities. Angela, can we hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, we can hear you. Let me
Okay.
unshare. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. And I'm going to share. I think.
There it is.
Got it? Okay.
Yep.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending. As Ellen said, my name is Angela Uliana-Murphy. I'm an attorney. I practice exclusively with special education. I come at this from a parent's perspective because I have 3 adult children with disabilities. One has autism, one has mental health issues, and one is dyslexic. So it's a scary and frightening time right now for everyone for many, many, many reasons, but particularly with going back to school. And so this presentation today is really to give you the highlights of what appears to be the current state of education. A few caveats before we begin. Most of the slides come directly from Pennsylvania Department of Education guidance and their website. So where I'm stating my opinion, I will let you know. Obviously, there's no case law on this. There's been no hearings yet. There's no decisions. Well, perhaps there's been hearings, or they're starting to have hearings, but there's been no decisions. So we really don't have any idea at all how this is going to go if a parent contests what the school is providing their child. So this is my best, I don't want to say the word guess, but my best estimate right now of where we are. I will be giving you suggestions on how to proceed. I will let you know that I'm available for individual consultations at no cost, and I work throughout the state. So as Ellen said, she's going to be taking questions. If she sees something that needs to be addressed right away, she's going to jump in. Otherwise, I'll get through the presentation and we'll take questions at the end. We're going to cover four main issues. First of all, what happens to your child's IEP during COVID restrictions. We're going to talk about evaluations. We're going to mention early intervention. We're going to talk about a new animal on the scene called COVID compensatory services. And we're going to talk about masks and social distancing. I've had a number of IEP meetings lately, and unfortunately, half of the IEP meeting has been devoted to the wearing of masks. If you can take anything away from this presentation tonight, the one thing I really want to stress to you as parents is the IDEA is in full force and effect. There is nothing out there that has changed that. Your child is entitled to a free and appropriate public education. That's FAPE. And by the way, if I'm using in acronyms, if you have a question about the acronyms, pop that over to Ellen, and we can possibly correct that right away. I'm very concerned that parents aren't aware of their rights right now, and they think they have to take what's offered by the district, and that is absolutely not the case. Your child's IEP must be implemented, and your child needs to access his or her education, and he or she is entitled to FAPE. So if you bear that in mind, and again, if that's the only thing you bear in mind moving forward, your child has rights, and that's not changed. So what about an appropriate education in COVID? As I said, your child's IEP must be implemented even under the restrictions. And even if the district is limiting options or is totally virtual, everybody's doing so highly varied things out there, it's hard to predict. Whatever is being offered must be individualized. So they can't say, everyone's virtual, so your child has to go virtual, and here's what we're offering. Absolutely wrong. They have to provide the IEP services. The big question, and the question I don't know the answer to, is what really is FAPE under these circumstances? If you need to contest services and you need to end up in front of a hearing officer, what is the hearing officer going to say is FAPE? I don't have any idea. None of us do. I think appropriate is still going to be the watchword. So what's appropriate? What's reasonable? What's effective? What meets your child's needs? So if you're staying in that realm, I would say anything creative but still appropriate and reasonable should be on the table. The manner of delivery of services obviously may need to change. If your child cannot attend school in person because of medical issues, their speech therapy is going to have to be delivered via virtually, for example. Another side effect of talking with parents is many of our children have suffered not only losses in their education, but they've developed new issues to address, particularly mental health issues. Depression, anxiety is rampant. So some of our kids with disabilities who may be identified as ADHD now are showing depression and anxiety. That's going to need to be addressed, and I'll touch on that later. A lot of families are talking about behavioral regression. A child had been doing well at the time of the closure, went home, and everything fell apart. And so that behavioral regression is also going to need to be addressed. So I just don't want to give you a list of concerns. I want to try to give you some ideas on how to proceed. The districts seem to still be scrambling, even though I think many of them have started school. But if you have not yet heard from your special education department, I would reach out to your case manager and or the special ed director and talk to them about what's going on and even ask for an IEP meeting. A lot of the districts in the Lehigh Valley are offering to have children with IEPs attend 4 days if they're doing deep cleaning on a 5th day, or all 5 days. So you may hear officially that your school is hybrid or totally virtual, but a lot of the districts are offering that in-person 4 or 5 days a week. That's been fairly standard. So far, I haven't encountered a district that's not, but I also have not yet dealt with a district that's fully virtual. My suggestion to you is you provide any new information that you have to the district. Maybe you saw your developmental pediatrician, or your child saw his psychiatrist, and perhaps you have new evaluations. Perhaps your behavioral health support services have new evaluations, or they have data. Parents are in a unique position going into this school year, is because for the first time, you are actually the data keepers. You saw what was happening during the closure. You were the ones who were there every day. You saw what your child was learning. You saw how they were responding or how they were not responding. You may have been in email contact with the district constantly. So you have that information and you need to provide that to the district. Here's what happened. Here's the problems he had. Here's the work he didn't complete. And that needs to be part of the discussion going forward. Obviously, we all need to focus on collaboration. This is a difficult situation for everyone. Nobody is in a position of, and is in a good position because of this. The districts are scrambling, but again, the IPEA offers you a unique opportunity to focus on your child's needs. I always suggest collaboration. That's always better than litigation. And I suggest offering reasonable and practical options on what your child needs to access their education. Your therapist might have ideas, your behavioral health, you might have any number of people who you've been working with might have some ideas. I would highly suggest bringing that to the IEP meeting. With all the options out there, I know some people had to make choices regarding hybrid or entirely virtual. And a few weeks ago, there was even the option of going full-time. The state changed, the current guidelines have the school's ability to stay open based upon the incidence of exposure in the community. So most of the Lehigh Valley schools are in the moderate range, which means they can only do hybrid or virtual. Excuse me. So when you're looking at, if you still have a choice and you're looking at those choices, you want to know how the IEP supports and services are going to be delivered. How are they going to be delivered in person? What are those 2 or 3 days of virtual instruction going to look like? What is full virtual instruction going to look like? Is it going to be synchronous or asynchronous? How does your child respond to asynchronous? Is your child able to be independent? Are they able to attend to the computer? So then how do those instructional models fit your child's needs? A number of parents that I've talked to are concerned about the health and safety guidelines, how they will be enforced, and how will that impact instruction. So many of the families that I've talked to have opted to go virtual solely because of their concerns of their child's inability to wear a mask or comply with social distancing. How the instruction will be provided in the cyber option, I think, is a critical question to ask, because there are so many different models being floated out there. Everything from on the off days, there's actually going to be simultaneous live broadcasting of the sessions. That's not I didn't hear that often, but I heard that once or twice. That their teachers are going to be posting assignments similar to what happened in the spring on the virtual days. Teachers are going to be posting lectures. 2 days are going to be live instruction. The other 2 days are going to be supplementing that. So all of those things are going to figure into what you're going to need in order to meet your child's needs. If you're looking at a cyber program, you want to make sure that they're flexible. So some of the districts have been outsourcing the cyber to third parties. My experience in the past has been that the third-party vendors can be rather inflexible in how they deliver and how they modify their programs. That obviously is not acceptable to a child with an IEP. And if you need cyber instruction and that's the option provided, you're going to need to have a serious discussion with your district. A big theme and a big question and concern from my families has been, how will your child receive individualized support in a virtual option? Again, this is varied wildly by districts. Sometimes that doesn't come up at all. If the child already has a para, sometimes the para is doing a private chat room with the child. But and some of our children who did not need one-to-one in an in-person setting require it in a virtual setting because they're just not doing their work. Families have to go back to work. Families have multiple children. Monitoring and keeping track of how everyone is logging on is a daunting and next to impossible task. So you want to hear what they're doing, and then from your own experience over the closure, you want to address what you think your child may need. There are some interesting sources out there that are talking about how to individualize virtual instruction. I don't think anybody's quite gotten to the key question, which is how is it going to be effectively individualized? But we're all working on that. So that's the general overview of the current options. Again, you don't have to accept what is being offered. You're going to have to collaborate, and it's going to have to be a reasonable option, obviously. But that's the way the law was before the COVID situation, and that's the way the law will continue to be. A second issue to touch upon, and it's a huge issue, and it's an area of real concern of mine, is the issue of evaluations. Without a comprehensive and well done evaluation, you cannot possibly have an appropriate IEP. The evaluation guides identifies what your child's needs are, and then guides in order to address those needs. That's where the services and the goals are built from. So if you don't have a good evaluation, you don't have a good IEP. So obviously what happened was most of the evaluations got completely stalled with the closure. Practically speaking, any in-person assessment and observation was canceled. So I don't know how the districts are possibly going to respond to both the backlog from the spring and the kids who are going to need to be assessed moving into the fall. It's a huge concern of mine because there are absolutely no waivers of evaluations or reevaluations. There were no waivers even during the closure. The way the school districts got around that was if an evaluation was pending to be completed during the closure, they did record review and they did rating scales, and then they issued a report that basically said everything else needs to be done in person. The governor closed the schools, so we can't proceed, so we will reissue a permission to evaluate in the fall. When they'll reissue the permissions to evaluate, I think if this happened to you, you're going to have to stay on top of that and say, I want you to reissue that permission right now. Because the timelines also have not been waived, and you can agree to extend the timeline, and of course under any circumstances that's a good idea, but our families can't wait anymore for these evaluations. So it's going to be curious to see what happens. I know that you just need to focus on your child and say, where's my permission and how are we proceeding? The district, again, should be reissuing those permissions. I would suggest that you probably want to stay on top of that. I don't know if they're automatically going to be doing that because they're just swamped right now, but you want to get that started, particularly you keep hearing through the whispers through the wind that what if schools close again? So I would want to get this started sooner rather than later, particularly if your child has not yet been identified. If your child has been awaiting their initial evaluation, you definitely want to move on that as soon as possible. So the reason why the evaluations became such a big issue during the closure was that the completion of the evaluations really requires requires using standardized assessments, and standardized assessments require that you use standardized measures and you have to give the test in a certain way. So the failure to complete standardized assessments without complying with those requirements could invalidate results or impact eligibility. I think, again, this is another area where we should be looking at creativity, but the flexibility of the districts in finding alternate ways to proceed has also varied greatly. I might have a few questions. How will districts be proceeding that are not returning to in-person instruction? Right now, they're with social distancing and masks, you should be able to, a psychologist should be able to meet with the student. But what are they going to do if that particular district is not functioning in person? I believe that delays in assessment are extremely detrimental to the child, and it will be incumbent upon the district to find a way to complete those evaluations in an appropriate manner. A number of the private experts and test designers are, of course, under these circumstances, looking for different ways to deliver assessments. Your district's openness to those different ways may also vary greatly. For delayed initial evaluations, again, your child has not yet been identified and you had your first evaluation during the closure, or you're going back to school and there are new issues and you have a diagnosis and you're going to be asking for an evaluation. The PDE guidance, and I think this is right on target, is suggesting that additional supports and services could be added to the child's program pending the completion of the evaluation. If the district starts providing more services, they will mitigate the detriment to the child in failing to proceed and failing to complete the evaluation. A question for you as parents is, if you have a diagnosis from a physician, whether it be medical, strictly speaking, or mental health, and you provide that to the district, a district can proceed with developing a 504 plan, which is a list of accommodations and supports that can be provided without developing an IEP. There are no goals and objectives in a 504 plan, and there, typically speaking, is no case manager or special education services, but you can at least get a safety net under your child pending the evaluation. The difference between IEPs and 504 plans is probably a day-long presentation in and of itself, so I'm not going to touch upon that here. But if you are waiting for an evaluation, and particularly children with medical concerns such as epilepsy, a 504 plan is usually a standard part of the services. You can use that 504 plan to either revise it, or if it has not been developed, push to have that developed. Is there another source for the required information? Again, did you get a private speech eval over the summer? Or do you have a private psychiatric evaluation? Or did you go to a private psychologist? Bring those things to the table. What alternate methods of assessment are there? Has there been recommended changes that would allow the test to proceed? That is out there. And if to stress, if your child's evaluation has been delayed, I would request that an permission to evaluate be issued upon the return to school. So another key point, especially given the losses that have occurred over the closure, my suggestion to families is, if your client has not had a recent and comprehensive evaluation, I suggest that you consider requesting that the district proceed with a reevaluation at some point during the school year. Now, obviously, if everybody came back and asked for a reevaluation, they would be slammed. But for example, if your child's one of those who has a honeymoon in the first 6 weeks, you might, in October, ask for a reevaluation. Something may develop that in November you need to ask for a reevaluation. If the child continues to have difficulty, you may request it. But if you suspect a big loss out of the closure, I would also suggest this. And certainly, if you had a child identified with ADHD and now we're dealing with depression and anxiety, and you want to expand the services, you're going to need to request a reevaluation. But accurate and complete information is critical, and we do have to find out a way that we get this in light of, again, the disastrous impact that the closures have had on our children. There was some good guidance and some good news about early intervention. So if you have a little one who is transitioning from early intervention to kindergarten, the guidance from the PDE allows for no delay in services. The districts are going to be permitted to adopt or revise the current preschool IEP and issue a NORAP to provide services in kindergarten, where the disability category corresponds with the IDEA. So this is great news. If the child was identified with developmental delay, the district does not have to reevaluate the child going into kindergarten, and they can offer services, but a reevaluation would need to occur prior to first grade. Now, developmental delay is not a disability category under the IDEA, which is why this usually, you might see autism or other health impairment. So since this does not correspond with any disability category under the IDEA, the state's still permitting districts to proceed with services for these children. So the early intervention transition to kindergarten should be made easier by this guidance. Now, Ellen, do we have any questions before we go into COVID compensatory services?
Yeah, let me read this to you. Can the schools force a student to wear their mask 100% of the time if doing so causes issues with their medical issue or disability? This person says that they haven't explored what 8+ hours of mask time, if their child can do that, and they have concerns about that.
We are going to get to that. That's the last section of the presentation, so I'm going to address that in some detail after COVID compensatory services. Anything about the first two sections, perhaps, or?
No, I have a question here, but we're going to save this other question till the end.
Okay, but the mask issue is huge, and I will be addressing that and offering some suggestions. A new animal called COVID compensatory services is out there, and PDE has guidance on it. And these slides are pretty much quotes from PDE, and it's interesting. These services are going to be designed to help remediate the losses the child suffered from the closure. And so I'm going to read through this slide just because I think the language is important. The services will be determined by an IEP team that are needed to remedy a student's skill and or behavior loss and or lack of progress. So there's three distinct areas here: skill, behavior loss, and lack of progress that resulted from the LEA. The LEA is the district local educational agency. The LEA is an ability to provide FAPE during the extended school closure. COVID compensatory services should be considered only after the student receives services to recover lost skills or behavior or to make progress to the levels determined appropriate prior to the extended school closure. Now, these are being called recoupment services, and this is what I'm finding very interesting about this. The next slide is available on Patan's website, and it's a little graph, a little schematic that I think is reasonably parent-friendly. Now, what is supposed to be happening, in addition to everything else that's going on, is within 2 weeks of resuming in-person instruction, the district is supposed to take data on the child's performance and compare that fall data with the data that existed prior to the closure. So this is supposed to happen within 2 weeks. Now, I've not heard this discussed yet, and I think it's going to be quite daunting, but this is supposed to happen within 2 weeks of resuming in-person instruction. And again, in-person isn't defined. Is it in-person 2 days, in-person 4 or 5? And in addition, what if the schools close again? So are we going to just go back to this? So it's quite a mess, needless to say. So if the data indicates regression in skills and or behavior patterns and a lack of progress, again, these are 3 distinct areas. I think the behavior patterns is going to be huge for a lot of our families, because the children did behaviorally regress, even though behaviors had been contained prior to the closure. So if there's regression, the district is supposed to provide instruction services that are these recoupment services. Now, recoupment services in this schematic are distinctly different than following the IEP. What are recoupment services going to be? I think it's going to be very interesting. And to me, I think it's a window of opportunity for families to talk about what do we need to add to the IEP in order to allow for the child to basically get back to the point where they were in March. The districts probably do recoupment beginning of every year because everybody forgot something, but I think this is more because we're also talking about skills and behavior patterns and lack of progress. So this recoupment services, to me, again, I don't know if I'm right, I'll put that out there, but to me, it means something more than what was offered, strictly speaking, in the IEP. Then they're supposed to collect data, and they're supposed to communicate with the families. Now, if you look at, if there's no regression, well, we continue with the IEP, and that's where I see the recoupment services as being distinctly different. No later than the end of the 3rd month of these provision of recoupment services, the district is going to determine, did the child regain lost skills and or behavior patterns and or progress? And if they did, they continue with the IEP and maintain communication. If they did not, if the child did not make progress, then there's supposed to be an offer of COVID compensatory services. Now, what this is going to look like, again, I have no idea, but it is very specifically a specific method of addressing the closure, the losses from the closure. The factors to be looked at in determining if CCS is needed look conspicuously like that what would be in an evaluation report. So my thought immediately was, again, my opinion only, if we have to look at COVID compensatory services, should we be also looking at some type of reevaluation? Because look, all of these items, levels of academic and functional performance, observation information from teachers. Here's an important one, the student's ability to access remote learning and services during the closure. Who's the custodian of that information? It is you as parents. The student's engagement in the learning process during the closure, again, that's the information you're going to have. Historical data, services provided during the closure, data collection, results of formal and informal assessments, all of this, again, looks conspicuously like a reevaluation. It's not being called that, but again, I toss out to you as parents at any given time, you can request a reevaluation of your child. Hopefully you don't need to, hopefully you have the information you need, but this is something to consider. So all this information will be looked at in determining what is COVID compensatory services. So other items from PDE is that COVID CCS is supposed to be calculated on an individual basis. Again, you should not hear anything about an IEP, anything at all that doesn't say individualized basis. That's the I in the IEP. So you should never hear, we're not doing that, or we don't do that, or we can't do that. Those should never be words that you actually hear at a meeting. These services are not to supplant the current IEP. So they're not to, the things that you're supposed to get in your IEP should not be part of COVID compensatory services. The district is supposed to document this, the offering of these services, through a notice of recommended educational placement. Now, I find that interesting because on the NOREPs, you have an opportunity to say that you disagree. And if you disagree, you can ask for mediation and due process. So I'm sure the hearing officers, again, what are the hearing officers going to do with a due process complaint on an offer of COVID compensatory services? Who knows? We don't know. But you, again, this is not something that you should just be, here's what we're offering you. Here's what we're going to do. It should be a dialogue with you. It should be based upon an individualized recoupment service. And it should be based upon an IEP team decision. Now, whether you feel like it or not, and most of the time my families don't feel like it, you are the key person on the IEP team. And so you won't have to accept, again, what's being offered here. You should be engaging in a collaborative discussion. And if you are not satisfied, you will have an opportunity to contest that through due process or mediation. Now, COVID compensatory services must be considered if there was a delay in finding an eligibility due to the inability to complete the evaluation. So those families who were in that initial phase, we should be talking about CCS. And this is separate from ESY. Now, CCS could occur over the summer, but again, ESY is supposed to be extended school year, is supposed to be delivered as part of the IEP. This is on top in order to compensate the child for the COVID loss. So a couple interesting thoughts I had about students who are aging out and CCS. If a student has aged out during the 2019-20 school year, the IEP team should meet within a reasonable period of time to determine whether that student needs CCS. So this can occur even if the child's received a high school diploma. So those older students may have an opportunity for some additional services from the district using CCS. So I think that's really important to remember, especially if you had someone who turned 21 during last school year. They may have lost quite a bit and probably did, and CCS is going to be designed to address that. So some questions I had, just again, these are my opinion. What is recruitment services? This is going to be the big one, and I think there's potential here. So not much to get excited about nowadays, but I think, you know, addressing this separately could be robust for the student. Again, we have to be reasonable. We have to be collaborative, because going to hearing on this stuff is going to be quite the challenge, and it won't get the child services any quicker. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what the districts are going to do with this. One interesting piece is a lot of clients have reported that their districts, they didn't hear from the districts. The district didn't take any data collection during the closure, nothing. I've had cases where I reviewed the data from the closures, and it says data not collected because of COVID-19 closure. So what data was in place in March and what data was not taken during the closure is going to be, I think, something that parents need to look out for. The question, more legal question, is how does the CCS differ from traditional compensatory education? I haven't figured that one out yet, but that's another piece that's out there. I highly doubt that the hearing officers are going to award compensatory education for the closure unless the district was a complete and abject disaster, because, you know, they latched on to those little words that they have to make a good faith effort. It appeared in, I think, a couple sentences of their guidance, and they latched on to that. And so as long as the district made a good faith effort, I think the hearing officers are going to let them off the hook, but some didn't. And so traditional compensatory education should also be available. How that differs from CCS, I don't know yet. Again, how should you be requesting a reevaluation as part of this process? That is an individualized decision. And I should say that everything I'm saying to you is in broad strokes. Everything should be individualized to your child's needs. And every answer, while answers to the questions may be somewhat similar, there's usually no pat answer. Well, there shouldn't be a pat answer in special education. Another problem, again, that I see is, what if the closure resulted in eligibility in another disability category? This will certainly need a reevaluation. So what if your child with epilepsy developed anxiety and depression over the closure, and now he or she just doesn't even want to go back to school, or, you know, is unable to complete their work, or is very depressed, and we need to address that as part of the IEP. That would certainly require a reevaluation, although I do think you could start with some reasonable services prior to that happening. So I think that transition issues are going to be interesting, again, with regard to CCS and even in general, because like all aspects of the IEP, this should be individualized, or not should be, must be. But older students there may be community programs that are running in person and that the student could participate in. So if you consider that the older student may benefit from a community program, especially in districts that are using virtual instruction, it may be something to put on the table. So instead of just doing virtual instruction, the student is going to receive 3 days a week of community job coaching from a particular agency. I would put, you know, any way for the student to get some in-person instruction, I think can be put on the table, including, is there a private school that's operating in person? Now, it's always difficult to address the request for a private school tuition, but it's certainly in the realm of possibility in the right type of case. And again, I think CCS can benefit the older student. It could extend the services. So if the child's community service was closed and the child hasn't been able to go out into the community for the last 6 months, I think it's more than reasonable to ask to extend the IDA services beyond age 21. So a lot of potential here for creativity. I think creativity is particularly robust in issues of transition because there are community programs out there that are designed to deal with the needs of the older student. Now, medical issues. One thing is pretty clear is that families with medical concerns, either for their child or another family member, are going to be able to access virtual instruction. I have not heard of a district that wasn't offering full virtual instruction. Now, here's the problem. If the child can't access virtual instruction, even though it's medically needed and they can't go to school, what is that instruction going to look like? And this is not a new problem. This problem of accessing instruction for a medically fragile child is a consistent one. One of the hopes I have coming out of this debacle is that we may actually find robust ways to provide instruction to a child who's medically fragile, rather than just saying, well, get online and do this or that. But again, the program has to be individualized. So if your child really needs one-to-one instruction in order to do their virtual instruction, well, we have to figure out a way to do it. Supports and services will need to be provided taking into account the medical concerns of the family. That's pretty clear. My concern is, how are we going to individualize that instruction? What is that going to look like? So here we go to masks. The mask issue has probably been one of the most disturbing issues. Most of my IEP meetings, or a number of my IEP meetings over the last few weeks, really have revolved around wearing masks. Now, our children have enough issues, and now there's significant concerns on both sides of this coin. But you know, when we have a child who's unable to medically wear a mask, are we really going to spend time trying to teach that child to wear a mask? So the guidance it changes. So the current guidance is children 2 years or older are required to wear the mask unless they have a medical condition or disability documented in accordance with Section 504 that precludes the wearing of the face covering in school. Now, these accommodations are supposed to be discussed with the healthcare provider, the nurse, and the IEP team. It looks like all the districts are going to be insisting on medical documentation. I'm recommending to my clients that if their doctor, that they provide it to make it clear. I've seen varied responses. It looks like most of the medical community may be hesitant to write that because a lot of it will say give breaks, allow time. So keep the mask on for a while and keep it off. So hopefully your doctors are fully cooperative with this because if your child cannot wear the mask, they're not supposed to be forced to do so. However, I've seen varying responses here as well. There is a school of thought that the health and safety issues outweigh the child's medical needs and the need to not wear a mask. So what are we going to do? How are we going to extend the child's need to wear a mask? Or how are we going to separate them? Are they going to use, plexiglass barriers around the desk? Whatever. So the more you have from your doctor, I think the better. It's going to, again, highly vary. Some of the districts were very responsive, and even I had a meeting regarding with the IU, and the IU said some of our kids are not going to be able to wear a mask. They're just not going to be able to do it. So there was a concern also voiced. Well, what are other kids going to say about my child not wearing a mask, or what are other parents going to say? My position on that would be that's for the school district to deal with. That if your child cannot wear the mask, then the district has to deal with any form of mask bullying that may occur. The reality is that there's such a diverse amount of needs that are arising out of this situation that we have to be flexible enough to deal with the children who are medically fragile, and we also have to be able to deal with the children who are medically unable to wear the mask. I'm thinking particularly about the autistic population, nonverbal, or somebody who's asthmatic. Lots of myriad of reasons, anxiety disorders. I mean, there's a myriad of very serious reasons, and I don't think any of those reasons should be diminished. If there's ways to compromise, great. If not, I suggest making provisions for the mask exemption very clear in the IEP or 504 plan. One of the reasons for this is I have seen in the paper and read in school district reports that there's actually going to be discipline taken for a child who refuses to wear a mask. Well, what are you going to do if the child refuses to wear a mask? Well, we're going to give them a disciplinary referral. So, well, kids serve in detention because they won't wear a mask. I think it's a complete nightmare. I can't imagine little tiny kids keeping a mask on all day. So this is an area of concern. So you need protecting your child with the exemption, the IEP and the 504 plan will be essential. Showing flexibility is also good. So if your child really can wear a mask for a short period of time, and perhaps you make an arrangement that if they're in the general school community, they'll have a mask on, but in the classroom they won't, or routine breaks, try to be creative and flexible as well. But the bottom line is if it's medically documented, then there should be an exemption. Now, my opinion, this is my opinion, is that the health and safety recommendations should not interfere with support required in the IEP, right? These guidelines may change how the supports are provided. For example, a child taking a break, has to take a break, is going to have to stay 6 feet away from his or her peers, or the child may have to put a mask on to go. What if the child took a drink and went to the water fountain? Well, he won't be able to go to the water fountain. So what else are we going to do? Child needs a sensory break. This has been a big issue. Well, we're not going to have the sensory room anymore because you can't maintain the cleanliness, or the child can't share sensory toys. Well, we're going to have to find a way to make sure the child has access to this. Again, this is not where we expect a pat response from a district. We expect to say, okay, all right, yeah, you don't want him sharing sensory objects, so where are you going to put a box of sensory objects that my child can access? And you can send them home and I'll clean them or whatever at the end of the day. So that's going to take a lot of flexibility. I've heard the phrase desensitizing a child to wearing a mask. I don't know where that falls in the IEP. Now, because it's sort of, again, it's going to be based upon the child's needs. If we have an older student who's trying to keep a job, and in order to keep the job, he has to wear a mask, well, yeah, we might need to desensitize that older child to wearing a mask. But, I think a lot of our kids have so many issues that desensitizing them to wearing a mask really is, I think, a parental, it's your choice. It might be of high value to your child that, I have an elderly parent and he really has to keep the mask on. I need help with that. Well, then it should go in the IEP. But if you have a lot of other issues, again, I think that has to be driven by you. So I encourage you not to let those choices be taken away from you as part of this process, because the IEP is, again, individualized education plan. So just to conclude before we go to questions, some general observations, and again, some questions I took from the PD site and my own ideas. What has been the collaboration between the special education teacher and the regular education teacher in remote instruction? My understanding and feedback I received from the closure is there wasn't much. So that would be one of the critical questions in dealing with a hybrid model or a virtual model, because if you're there in person, I think that the collaboration takes place rather naturally. But how is that going to take place with either a different type of model? Obviously, if you're in a co-taught class with a special ed teacher, you know that the collaboration is occurring, but how is that occurring? And again, that could be a relevant question for in-person as well. You need to make sure that your communication with the district is sufficient. I always say when I'm talking to teachers and administrators that the easiest way to avoid someone coming to see me is to hear them out and give them the information that they need. So you're going to, and right now, especially with the zoo that's happening right now, it's going to be hard, but you need to make sure that you're receiving the communication that you need from the district. Are they giving you what they need? In my opinion, there can be no collaboration without communication. If you don't know what's happening, how can you collaborate? It's not possible. You need to clearly communicate your concerns to the district. Report the difficulties your child encountered. They need to know what happened during the closure, and this is going to be especially important if you're doing virtual instruction for either hybrid or otherwise. So I would put everything in writing. The good thing about email correspondence is you can shoot an email, but you also have a written record. So you're going to try to keep good records with all the other things you have to do. Keep good records, keep the data, keep records of your communication with the district, and be positive. You don't want to send that email that you regret. I always tell parents, if you're mad, write an email, rip it up, and then calm down and write another one, because your angry email is going to be exhibit A at the due process hearing, right? Oh, she's uncooperative. We can't deal with this family. So keep it positive. Even if you don't feel like they're being positive, you keep it positive, because it is about, after all, it's about your child. Now, this is important. If your child can't complete the work, let the district know. I've heard families who are doing the work and handing it in. If you do that, they're not going to know that the child didn't complete it. So, this is, I was there myself. I have to make sure he gets it done, and I better help. You completing the work is not going to give us a picture of what your child actually needs. So again, that's where communication and collaboration comes into play. Least restrictive environment is what your child is entitled to, but that's now being measured by the type of instruction that the regular education student receives. So that would be hybrid or virtual. So that's changed, or at least I think there could be some debate on that, on what is a least restrictive environment. But I do think a hearing officer is going to say, well, if everybody else is receiving hybrid, that's what we should be measuring the IEP from. However, again, most of our kids need in person, so that's not changing. Most of the districts are accommodating that. I've seen some questions where the parents wanted to reject services and to avoid dealing with the district during the closure. I don't recommend ever outright rejecting services or actually asking that your child be removed from special education, right? Yes, you might need to reject their service, and you can file due process about that, but don't take them out of special education. And try to work something out instead. That definitely is something that you don't want to avoid the provision of services just to get out of dealing with the district. The IEP is a fluid document. You could ask for another IEP meeting at any time. So that's going to be particularly critical, I think, during this time. And obviously, they're all virtual. I haven't had an in-person IEP meeting, and frankly, I don't expect to the rest of this year. But that should make it easier because everybody just zooms in. But it is a fluid document, and it can be revised at any time. And it can be revised if everybody agrees without having a meeting. Now, cyber charter schools are also required to provide special education services. The districts do not want you to pull out to a cyber charter because they will lose money. They are paying the cyber charter to send your child to cyber charter. That is why so many of you have probably heard, we strongly encourage you to look at our cyber program and not do a cyber charter school. All well and good, you need to pick, if you have to go virtual, well, you might as well pick the program that gives your child the most flexibility and will provide your child with the services that they need. So when you look at cyber charters, and if you are going virtual entirely, you may want to see what a cyber charter can do to help your student more than your district could. Check out the options, check out the cyber charter's reputation for delivering special education, talk to other parents. Some of them, I think, have closed enrollment because they got flooded. Others are slowly plodding through the flood of applications they received. Some do a great job with special education services and some do not. That is, and the same thing you're going to deal with your districts. Some are going to do a great job with individualizing virtual instruction, some will not. And if you can enroll in a cyber charter that will, it may be something to seriously consider. So I have no other slides, and you can always feel free to contact me at my email or my phone. I'm going to stop sharing, and then Ellen can tell me if there's any questions, or I'll look at the chat too.
Yeah, someone asked you to elaborate a little bit on determining the student does not have the ability to access services. Does that mean if a child does not participate, or if they participate poorly online, will they offer compensatory services? And what would that be, since they're not allowed to be in person, at least in the Philadelphia school district? Is there any way they could offer in-home services?
I think that, and here's what's going to be interesting with the districts that are going virtually entirely. In my opinion, if the child needs in person and there's a way to get it, the parent can put that on the table. Now, are the districts going to be clamoring to pay for private programs? No. And you are probably going to end up with a due process hearing if you want a private program. I don't know if these districts are opening their schools that offer special ed programs. Is there an IU program that your child could enroll in? So you want to talk about the options, and by accessing education, in my opinion, that means, can your child log on? Can they participate? Can they engage in the instruction? A lot of our kids don't. I've had clients who've told me that, they logged on once or twice and hung up, and that was it. So it has to be meaningful. And so that's what I mean by accessing the instruction. If somebody has to be with them one-on-one for them to even log on and make sure they complete work, that somebody should not be you. But I don't know what the solution is going to be in districts like Philadelphia and Allentown that went completely virtual. I think that's highly problematic, and they are, in my opinion, they have to offer options. Now, what that is and what you will have to do to pursue that, I don't know. So that's a tough one. There may be some of the districts are offering instructional assistance support one-on-one virtually, but again, if the child isn't even aware of the interaction, visually, like I'm staring pretty much at a blank screen right now, but I know you're all out there. A child with autism might not be able to, or a child with an intellectual disability may not even be able to make that connection. So brainstorm with your private providers, look at other options in the community, bring it to the district and say, we need to talk about options. Something has to be done. He can't do virtual. So what are my options? And if they don't offer you options, I think that's where, yes, okay, I want you to send a tutor to the home, or I found an agency where I can get, where he can go and receive services during the day, or here's a private school that he can attend in person. None of them easy options, but your child has to meaningfully access his education. I don't know if that helps.
Someone had voiced a concern. How do you think mentally it'll affect the children if they're the ones without the mask, and then students around them? How come they don't have to wear a mask from their classmates?
That's going to be tough, but I think in many respects it's no different from, you flip-flop it and you say, well, your child's the only one that has a communication device, and everybody else is like, look at him, why does he have the communication device? He must be dumb or something. So to me, I think, that's something that's going to have to be worked on with the district. It is an issue, and some of the kids don't want to feel left out. So that may be where, okay, you're trying to develop a plan to help your child wear a mask. Some people, it's not going to be possible. And for those people that it's not going to be possible, I think the district is going to have to deal with that. And maybe there's a little talk with the class, and as this would have to be with your permission. Susie can't wear a mask because she has asthma. And so, we're not going to discuss it. Susie's going to be, sitting here, but she's not going to have a mask on, and kind of, that's it. I don't know. But our children are unique in various ways. And I think we're going to have to draw from how we help them be different in whatever ways before with the mask issue. I think mask shaming is a form of bullying, flat out. It's my opinion. But I do think where you seriously, or the child really can't wear the mask, and in my opinion, I'm not going to be the person that makes that question and questions you as a parent about whether your child really can't wear this mask. If you come to me and say my child really can't wear this mask and here's this doctor letter, I'm going to help you make sure that we get what your child needs, and that includes dealing with those issues. Why does Susie not have to wear it? Again, this is something, what do they keep saying, that we're building the plane while we're flying it? Well, we are. So my opinions is based upon, again, what if your child is being picked on because they have something that that nobody else has in the classroom because of their disability? It's flip-flops now. Okay, Alan, anything?
Yeah, can you comment on virtual education for students in a life skills placement? Obviously, it's more challenges engaging via online, and the life skills class has a smaller number of students to begin with. Right.
Now, my knowledge in the Lehigh Valley is that the IUs are running in person. So the life skills classes, anything run by the IUs in the Lehigh Valley is actually running in person. Again, I don't know, it's a great question for those who aren't being permitted that option. I don't think that's remotely appropriate. I think if a school district is saying you have to be virtual and there's nothing we can do about it, well, they're going to have to figure out something. So my question to that would be, is there a private life skills program that your child can go to? Are there services that could be in the home that could support the child? Is there a private program where the child could get the services in person? I know a lot of mental health services have been telehealth as well. But to simply say, in my opinion, to simply say a child cannot go to school, we're doing everything virtual, but we know this child cannot access education virtually, that's not acceptable. And that should go to an IEP team. And if there's nothing given concretely, you may have to proceed to a due process hearing. But you should get no pat answers here. Again, you should not be hearing, this is what we're doing, boom. No, that's never appropriate. So it's something that I'll need to look at, because frankly, I haven't had a client yet who's been in a situation where it's entirely virtual. I've been able to help my clients. Most of the Lehigh Valley districts are offering, I think, I don't have anybody in Allentown right now, but most of the Lehigh Valley districts are offering a virtual or hybrid option and offering 4 to 5 days in person for special ed students. So that's a great question. And whoever asked that, if you want to discuss it more privately, it would give me a chance to do some brainstorming. If anybody has that issue, I would suggest give me a call or email me, and that'll give me a chance to think about that further. But in my opinion is there has to be options without question.
Can you recommend any particular charter school that you like?
Please email me. I prefer to do that in person.
And I just want to put in the chat can you say what your email address is? And I'll also put in the chat button.
I'll put it in the chat. I'll do that, Ellen.
Okay. This is not I'm finding that there's a lot of personnel shortages in schools. Like for example, Southern Lehigh, I believe they kind of went to virtual because, their kids are home, and so they need to be home. So maybe they'll take a leave or something. So I think, are you finding there's a big shortage of school personnel? And what does this, when you're dealing with the IEP, what if they come back? Well, we just don't have anybody.
Well, that's where I think we have to look at privately paid services, because that's not acceptable. I mean, sure. I mean, and districts are being hit hard. I mean, and the teachers have their children home, or they're older, or they're compromised. So there's lots going on here. But simply saying I don't have enough staff would never be an appropriate response. I mean, it wouldn't be an appropriate response. My clients would hear that. I've heard that. Well, we can't give you a one-to-one because we don't have enough. Wrong. This is where something collaborative would need to be happen, and this is where the COVID compensatory services might be especially needed. But we don't want to wait 3 months. So this is where I think if the family can get a tutor, if there's a private program, if there's alternate ways, this is where you might look at the cyber charters. I don't know. So, but and this is what's so tough for me, because all these questions are fantastic questions, but I cannot give a clear roadmap because I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't know what the district's responses are going to be. My guess is that they will fight paying privately for services because they're being crunched monetarily as well. But simply to say that we don't have staff and we can't provide it is never acceptable. We go to the table and we figure out how we're going to address it. And we may need to be creative, but our kids can't wait until the teachers go back to school to be instructed. It's not feasible. So I think Harrisburg is going to have to come up with something.
Okay. I missed this before when I asked you this question. The person that asked about life skills, I missed the second part that he said. The district is proposing hybrid with 2 days in person and 3 days virtual.
And this is where some of the families in special ed, I don't think may have heard from their districts yet. I don't know where this person is from, but if you haven't directly received the information from the district about your child's program, you may want to contact special ed. A lot of the districts are offering 5 days in person for the IEP students, and if the child's in an IU program, I think a lot of those are running 5 days. If not, you again need to say 3 days virtual isn't going to work. He or she needs in-person instruction or needs highly individualized instruction. What are we going to do? And this is where the brainstorming will need to take place, I think, on both sides of the coin, because I'm working with the family to figure out what are we going to propose. Do we have any options? And is there anything private out there? The district should be offering you alternatives though. And if you've just heard that we're going hybrid and you haven't heard specifically from special ed, you may want to check in with them because that might not apply to your student, particularly a life skills student.
Okay, well, that's about all the questions that people have written in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I want to thank you very much for doing this. I learned so much this evening. Thank you for taking the time out with your busy schedule to talk with us today. I really appreciate it.
And I just want to encourage everyone again, especially the couple, the couple questions I couldn't answer because I need to brainstorm those, and definitely the parent who has a question about cyber to let me know if you do have any particular questions. Contact me individually. It's an individualized program. We need to figure out what works for your student, and definitely advocate strongly. The law's on your side, and my heart goes out to all of you, and I wish you all good luck. And again, let me know if I can do anything further. And Ellen, you can always contact me as well.
And contact me as well, and I can get you in touch. Yeah, thank you very much. It was very enlightening, all the information.
And it continues to develop, it's an ongoing process. So I think an ongoing discussion is going to be needed, and we are going to have to brainstorm together. But thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Everyone have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.